Christopher Hadnagy, you are the president and CEO of Social Engineering Inc. You specialize in understanding the ways in which malicious attackers are able to exploit human weaknesses to obtain access to critical information through deceit. And you teach corporations on how to protect themselves. You are a wonderful speaker. I have seen some of your speeches, the TED Talking particularly, and you have written 3 books. And today we're here to speak about your latest book, Human Hacking: How Win Friends, Influence People, and Leave Them Better Off for Having Met You. Christopher, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, I mean, this is a great topic. Everyone wants to have more friends. Everyone wants to have a little bit of influence over their life. And we not necessarily want to take advantage of people. We want to leave them better off, but at the same time, make ourselves better off. And I think your book cover all these topics. And although you are a hacker, you focus more on the social aspect, not on breaking into computers and all this and that, but how to hack our life in order to make them better. So this is just an amazing topic. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you get into this field of expertise?
Well, I worked for a company where we were doing network pen testing, and we also did training. And I found that I wasn't really great at coding. So when we had a pen test, I would usually try to do like a phishing email or a phishing call. And it always worked, but I didn't really know how it worked or why it worked. It just worked. Like things would happen and people would give me stuff and I'd be like, wow, that was cool. But anyone who understands hacker mentality is like, I wanted to know why. Why did that work? Why did people give me stuff when I just ask? So I started to read books on psychology and influence and persuasion. And I started to see like, wow, this is the thing I did. And I didn't realize it. Let me try it on purpose now. And it would work even better. So I said to my boss at the time, we should write a course on how to do this stuff. And he said, well, we can't write a course without writing a framework. And there's no framework on social engineering in the whole world. So if you want it, you have to write it. So I took that on myself and I wrote the framework. It took me about 10 months and I released it on social-engineer.org, where it still is today. And, I released it and thought, okay, people will, find it somewhat interesting. And a couple of months later, I got a call from Kevin Mitnick's publisher asking me to write a book. And I thought, no, that's like, I'm not going to do that. And I said, no, I said, I'm not going to write a book. And my boss was like, call her back and write that book. Like, that's ridiculous. So I did. That was my first book that I wrote 10 or 11 years ago now, 11, 12 years ago. And it was called Social Engineering, the Art of Human Hacking. I would not read it if you haven't. It's not good. It's a 12-year-old book. But that book started my thought into, can I run a whole company doing just social engineering? Is that even possible? And I gave it a try. And here we are now 12 years later, and I have 20 something employees. And this is all we do, social engineering.
Wow. Okay, so you use some terms that are not too familiar. I think you use the term vision, and
Mm,
I'm not completely sure of what that means. So that means a lot of my audience don't know what
that's
that means.
okay. So phishing stands for voice phishing. So it's telephone phishing. So basically, the phishing that you do on people get calls. I don't know where you're from and if this is popular, but here in the States, we get a lot of phishing calls, like from government agencies saying you owe tax money, and if you don't pay, we're going to arrest you.
Right.
And those calls would be phishing calls, and then they could be really scary for people who don't know that they're fake.
Right. Okay. So I got into the habit as soon as I get one of those calls, I hang up. Is that a
Good.
good strategy? I
It
guess.
is. It
Okay.
is a good
Fantastic.
strategy.
Okay. The other thing is, uh, I had a girlfriend, and all she had to do is just do her eyelashes like this, and she will get me to do anything. And even worse, if they are not my girlfriend, if they are some pretty girl I meet in the streets. So is there a huge difference on human engineering between guys and girls? I mean, and is this something that girls maybe learn naturally without reading your book?
Well, so to answer your first question, yes, there is a difference in between influencing a guy and a girl, and it really is dependent on what's important to that person, right? So, Maybe for someone like you say you see a pretty girl and she bats her eyes and she asks you to do something and you're like, yes, I will do that. And somebody else that may not work on, right? But it may be something else that works on them, something like a good offer or a job offer or making some money or having some fame or prestige. Those things may work. But depending on, regardless if it's male or female, it depends on if the attacker, let's use that, or the person who's applying the principles finds out what is important to the subject. So if I know what's important to you, then I can easily influence you by offering you the thing that's important to you. Right. So if I want to attack you, which I don't, but if I did, and I went to your Facebook page or your Instagram page or your Twitter page, and I noticed that you always make comments about pretty girls or you always, say things that are like flattering, then I may, if I was going to approach you, I may not do it. I may have one of my female social engineers do it because I know that would work better. Right. So it's from a human engineering standpoint, it's looking at that. Now let's take it out of pen testing and attacking. Just every day we can do the same things, right? We could try to find out if you and I are friends, let's say, or let's say you and I are going to do a business deal together. And I say, okay, what is Alan, what's important to him? Let me look at, again, his social media. Let's figure out what things he likes. What are his hobbies? So I see you play soccer or football. You like art. You like really eclectic, abstract art. So I see that. So maybe what I do at that point is I say, during our conversation, I say a comment, oh, look at that beautiful piece of art on your wall there. Is that a Picasso? And maybe I do research and I know which artist it is. And you're like, oh, wow, you have a great eye. Well, I'm also a fan of that kind of art. And I looked into it because I think it's a beautiful thing, and now we have communication and I built rapport with you based on something that you enjoy. And I shouldn't lie about it. If I hate that piece of art behind you, I shouldn't say I love it because that's a lie and I can get caught in that. But if I can find something about you that I really like and I talk about it, that puts us in the same tribe. And that builds rapport and it makes you feel good, which means you'll be more compliant with whatever I ask.
Okay, and you discovered this art or profession through accident. But let me ask you, do you think this is something innate in all of us? Because little kids manipulate their parents without even thinking about it. I mean, they know which buttons to push, which strings to pull, and the parents end up buying the toy that they swore they wouldn't
Yeah.
buy.
Yeah, I think that we're born because, again, before we can learn to speak, whatever language it is that we're learning, we're communicating nonverbally. So all humans from a very, very young age, even infants, learn, hey, when I cry at this pitch, mom comes and she feeds me. When I cry at this pitch, dad comes and he changes my diaper. So they learn this, right? And they're trained. And then when they can learn to walk, but they can't speak yet, they look at our faces. Are we smiling or are we looking angry? And depending on how our faces are, they'll go, oh, this is safe. This is unsafe. This is good. This is bad. Now, something happens in the time when we start to grow up. We become toddlers, then we become young adults, teenagers, preteens. We become these different ages where we stop to relying on our nonverbals and we begin to rely on the knowledge we think we have, which is a shame. And that's what turns us into adults, which tend to be unaware of our surroundings because we stop using that knowledge that was so important to our survival when we were little. And we start to rely on, well, I think you're a good guy because you have a nice face and you say, you have a happy voice, but that doesn't mean anything. Serial killers can have that, right? So it's a matter of looking at training people to use those nonverbals to communicate better. But yes, you are right. Some people, or all of us, are born with that, and some people keep it throughout their whole life and use it. And some people, like my good friend Joe Navarro, he wrote the book What Everybody Is Saying. He's a nonverbal body language expert. When he moved to America, he came from Cuba and he knew no English. So to learn how to communicate with people, he learned how to read body language. And he knew that if what he was doing on his job was good or bad, based on how his boss stood. And that enabled him to succeed in a career and a life here in this country by learning that nonverbal communication.
Okay, and you also mentioned that in order for you to get to know me and my likes and dislikes, you go and take a look at my social media. Do you think we're revealing perhaps too much to our social
Oh,
media? And what are some of the other ways in which it could be used against us?
yeah. So social media is like it's like a two-way street, right? Like some of it's really good and allows us to connect with friends and family and new people across the globe. Like we're no longer hampered by distance. You and I can be thousands of miles apart and we're having a face-to-face conversation. That's wonderful, right? At the same time, I agree with what you said, is that people are putting so much on social media. They're putting where they live. They're taking pictures of them at their work desk with badges. People are taking pictures of themselves unclothed and putting it on the internet. These things reveal so much about us, our kids, where we go on vacation, our favorite restaurants. And those things can be used by attackers to get us to do things like click on emails or answer phone calls or answer text messages that can be very dangerous for our safety.
Wow. And okay, and so you told us how you got into writing your first book. Someone asked you, in fact, you're telling us not to buy it because I guess you have not developed your writing skills. But then can you tell us more, a little bit about your second book? And then we get to speak about this latest one, Human Hacking.
Sure. So I actually have 5 books, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. I
yeah.
saw it in the
So
Amazon page. I only saw three.
yeah, so I have them here. So what happened is that second one, I happen to have the pleasure of working with Dr. Paul Ekman, and he's like the granddaddy of nonverbals. He studied micro expressions, and he's been integral in that science. And I had the privilege of co-writing a book with him all about nonverbals and how we use them as social engineers, how we can use them in everyday life. Then my third book was on phishing, how to understand the psychology of phishing emails. My fourth book was a rewrite of my first book, and that was called Social Engineering, the Science of Human Hacking. So I always tell people, if you're in security, read that one. That's a good one. And then my fifth book is the new one, which is the Human Hacking, the one that you announced. And that book is totally different than everything else I've ever written. It's about how to use all of these skills in everyday life, not necessarily as a security person, just as an everyday human.
Wow. Okay. On your fishing book, can you tell us one or two traps that most of us fall victims of?
Sure. So fishers, as we can call them, attackers that use phishing, they look for emotional triggers. So they look for things that will get you to act emotional, so that way you don't think. Because when we're overly emotional, we don't think. So like for me, I tell this story all the time. I'm an Amazon junkie. I love buying things on Amazon, and I shop on Amazon all the time. And I got phished once through an Amazon email. It looked just like an order, and it said one of my orders would be declined, would not be shipped due to a declined credit card. And I clicked on the link, and it opened up what looked like a login page. And I fell for it because for me, that's one of the things I do all the time, which is shop on Amazon. Now, maybe you don't, so that wouldn't work on you. But what works on you? Maybe it's your favorite sport, a pretty girl asking to connect with you on social media. There's different things that would work on you that wouldn't work on me, and vice versa. So fishers look for the emotional trigger that you have, and then they fish you with that to get you to take the action that you shouldn't take.
So I guess what's the protection for that then?
So the first protection is it's literally it's like sounds so weird to say because people go, really, that's it? But it's really this simple. It's whenever you feel emotional during an interaction, to take a second before you reply. And I know that's easier said than done, but I've gotten into practice because I don't do that, of typing my response out, but promising not to click send until I take a break. So, because for me, I used to say, take a pause, but I never did it. I was like, no, I'm mad now. I want to answer, right? So I typed my email out, but then I made a commitment to myself that I'd never click send until I got up and just walked, got some water, came back and read it. And when I do that, I find that I'm like looking at the email going, oh man, I should not reply to this. I should not click on this. And that saves me. The second thing is making sure that you're using the technology that can be good for you, like password managers, second factor authentication on everything that you can have it on. Those things can save you that if you do fall for an attack, at least they can't gain access to your accounts because they don't have those things.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So tell us about this book. How can we influence people and leave them better off before they made us?
Yeah, so it boils down to a few key principles, which is one, always using an empathetic approach, which means that if I want to influence someone, let's say I really, really want something from you, I can't just go in with a goal of getting you to give me what I want, because that means I won't care about your feelings and I'll probably do something that will harm you or be damaging to you. So I have to look at that and go, okay, what do I want from Alan? I want him to do XYZ. So how do I get that? And I look at the different ways that I can communicate with you, and I choose a method that will leave you feeling better for having met me, which means it will use rapport and influence and positive emotional triggers to make you feel that we are part of a tribe, that we're friends, and we want to help and be with our friends. So the book is really how to do that, how to find those principles, how to communicate that way, how to think about other people in an empathetic way, and once you learn those skills, they're life changing.
And can you go over one or two of those principles?
Sure. So the very beginning of the book, I talk about something called DISC communication profiling. And I find this to be one of the most important things. So first, I apply it to yourself, understanding how you want to communicate, right? So there's four different communication types, like a D, which is very direct, an I, which is like an influencer, someone who's like a salesperson, very high spirited, an S, who is a supporter, someone who really cares about other people and is very empathetic, and then a C, someone who's very conscientious or detailed. They love details. So I give you quick tips on how to find out who you are, like how do you rate yourself, right? Now, once you know that, there's strengths and there's weaknesses with each one. So for me, I'm a D. I'm a very direct person. So my strength is I have no problem asking for things. I have no problem speaking to strangers. I have no problem talking. But sometimes I can be so direct that I can hurt people's feelings. So once you know that about myself, right? I know that about myself. I can now make alterations in my communication when I'm talking to someone who's not a D. So let's say you're not, you're like a S or a C. And if I know that, that means I can't be so harsh. I can't be so demanding. I have to be softer. And that would mean that you and I would communicate better. Understanding that about myself allows me to make changes that can make it easier for us to communicate.
Right. I saw your TED talk in which you are getting information for someone to get access to, I don't know, their system or whatever. So you portray to be a security person. And what you are really doing is role playing. You are making believe you are this a security person. So does this require some practice on assume or on make the other person believes something that we are not, like we, let's say, practicing empathy? Maybe I'm not an empathetic person, but I would like to at least play the role that I have some empathy towards someone's misfortune. So how would I go about that, about playing that and to learning it and displaying it, so I guess I'll be seen as an empathetic person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's to me there's two main differences. The story that you just told about what I did in my TED talk, I was playing a part and it was false because that's my job, right? I'm getting paid to test their security. I don't normally recommend that people do that in real life because let's say I approach you and I make believe I'm something I'm not. And then you and I become really good friends. And eventually you find out our whole relationship was based on a lie. It's going to ruin our friendship, right? So I always say that it's different when you're doing auditing or testing, like I do for work. But when I'm going to apply these principles in real life and I have a hard time with empathy, what I tell people is to look for common ground. So let's say you and I have completely different opinions on something, belief system, politics, whatever.
The elections.
Okay, so let's say we have a completely different belief system on that. You say one thing, you say right, I say left, whatever, we don't agree. Instead of me trying to convince you, I can try to find what is the common ground? What are the things that we agree on? And we can probably both agree that, man, isn't this world messed up right now? Isn't the situation everywhere, not just America, but everywhere, isn't it just scary? Aren't people just like so angry and fed up and tired of what's happening? And we can agree on that. So now it doesn't matter that I disagree with your politics. We found a common ground and we can talk about that. And that common ground allows us to have a discussion that doesn't turn into an argument or anger.
Wow. I
So,
have found out that generosity is an amazing tool
yeah.
for human hacking. And I give you an example. Every now and then I buy a whole bunch of cheap $10 wine. But no matter who I give it to them, I give one to the post office guy. And this guy loved me forever. And
Uh
it
huh.
only cost me like $10, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that it was the cheapest I could find in the store. This guy is, and
Yep.
I do that, and I think that that worked for me because
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
have that
think about
much.
what gift giving does. When you give somebody a gift, in essence, you're saying, hey, I thought about you
Mm,
and I'm willing to spend my money to say thank you to you. And people don't often get thanked for doing their job,
mm.
right? Their actual job. So now you took like the post office guy and you said, hey, I'm going to give you this gift. And I'm doing it because you're a great post office guy. Here you go. You just validated him. You rewarded him. You made him feel good. And you're the deliverer of that. Now, every time he sees you, his brain released a chemical called oxytocin, right? So his brain released a chemical sees you, his brain releases oxytocin and dopamine. It's a reward system. He feels good. And as long as you never change, right? Doesn't mean you have to keep giving him gifts, but if one day you came in and you treated him bad and you were like, listen, jerk, just give me my mail, then he'd be like, whoa, that's different. I'm not used to that.
Right.
And it would change the chemicals. But as long as you're always smiling and happy and treat him well, then that gift will last forever. Then he'll be like, this guy's awesome. I love this guy. And it's a great way to do human hacking.
Wow. Can you just give us one more human hacking trick that we can apply
Sure.
after listening to this podcast?
Yeah. So let me think. There's one that I like to use often, and it's called deliberate false statement. So what that means is if I want to get someone talking, I may say something like, let's say you and I were in a conversation in a Starbucks, right? So you're standing in line, and I have an Android phone, and I see you have an iPhone. I may say something like, hey, I got a quick question. I'm thinking of switching to iPhone, but I heard there's so much worse than Android. What do you think? Now, what do you think? Do you use an iPhone?
I use an Android.
Okay. Well, most people who are iPhone people will talk your ear off about why. So I threw out a deliberate false statement, right? Saying that I'm thinking of switching and I want you to tell me why. And people will open up their phones and they'll show you. And then I'll say something like, yeah, but isn't it heavier than my phone? They'll hand me their phone. No, no, look how light it is. Oh, really? Yeah, but what about that fingerprint thing? Is it hard to unlock? No, try. And all of a sudden you got someone's phone in your hand and you're holding it and you're using it and you're holding it up to your ear and you're scrolling through pictures and they don't care because I started the conversation with deliberate false statement.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So before we go, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast as well? You have a podcast, the kind of service that your business offer, because I just went and there you have so
sure.
many services and
Yeah.
I almost feel like I'm speaking to a version of James Bonds or something, you know, you, you
Well,
got
thank you.
all these techniques to get into corporations and test their security system. I find this fascinating.
Thank you very much. My podcast is called the Social Engineer Podcast. I've been doing it for almost 12 years now, believe it or not. Yeah, I know. I've been around for quite a while. When I started the podcast, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to have people on my show that were not in security, that were actors and policemen and FBI agents and musicians and psychologists. And I wanted to talk to them about what it is they do for a living and to find out how their skill set crosses over into understanding human interaction. And it's been very successful. So we've done that for, like I said, 11 and a half years now, and it's been really great. And we just started a new track this month in January here. We just started a new track where also a second podcast per month, we're interviewing a security professional to find out lessons we can learn and how we can become more secure. my company, which is Social Engineer, is focused just on that. It's kind of crazy. You know, all we do is human-based services. So we do phishing as a service, vishing as a service. We basically help large companies learn how they can be secure from human-based attack by pen testing them, by auditing them through those services. And then I run a conference every year called the Human Hacking Conference. This year, because of COVID, it's going to be virtual, but it's March 11 through 13. And we run this conference all about, it's not even about pen testing. It's like we have Joe Navarro coming, Robin Dreek, Dov Barron, R. Paul Wilson. There's just so many people. You could check the website out. It's humanhackingconference.com. And it's all about how to learn these skills from experts in their field to become a better human hacker.
Wow.
So yeah, we do a lot of different things and we have a lot of different stuff going on, but it's a lot of fun too.
Wow. Okay, so the last question, could you reach behind your back and show us that book and tell us one more time the title of the book? And then I just came out on the market a few days ago. So, wow, yeah. So where can
There it
people,
is.
yeah.
So
So
it's Human Hacking, Win Friends, Influence People, and Leave Them Better Off for Having Met You. It's my fifth book, and probably the one I'm the most proud of ever writing.
congratulations, Christopher. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.